Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Taylor Comblusier, a mining analyst at Red Cloud Securities. Today's webinar features Strickland Metals. Strickland owns two high-quality assets in established mining jurisdictions, the 5.4 million ounce gold equivalent Rogozna project in Serbia and the Yandal gold project in Western Australia. With about 41 million in cash and liquid assets supporting a 60,000 meter drill program across both assets, the company expects to deliver substantial resource growth over the next 2 years. Today, I have with me on the webinar Paul Lerpiniere, who is the Managing Director at Strickland Metals. The format of today's webinar will be comprised of two parts. In the first part, Paul will provide an introduction to Strickland and outline what you have to know about the company and what you have to look forward to through the rest of this year and into 2025. In the second part of the webinar, we'll take your questions live, so please send us your questions using the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. I'll note that you can type your questions in at any point throughout the presentation. To start, we'll handle the disclosures and then I'll turn it over to Paul. For Strickland Metals, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the Strickland corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Strickland-specific disclosures. So with that out of the way, I'll turn it over to Paul to introduce you to the company and what you have to look forward to.
Thanks, Taylor, and thanks everyone for joining. So the title of this presentation is Building a Mid-Tier Resources Company, and that is certainly Strickland's goal at the moment. About a year ago, Strickland was just a WA-focused gold explorer, and it sold a piece of ground in Western Australia to Northern Star for about 61 million in cash and Northern Star shares. So at that time, the management of the company really asked themselves, well, how do we grow this company to become a mid-tier resources company? And the answer that they came up with was they wanted a second asset, preferably one that has real tier one potential. So back end of last year, they scoured the globe looking for assets and met me around September last year. And at the time, I was running the Rogozna project in Serbia through my private equity firm, Ibera Capital. And the Strickland management took a look at the asset, really liked it. We had a lot of synergies between both companies, and we finalized the deal around March, April of this year, and that deal transaction closed in July of this year. So today, Strickland is a very different company than it was 12 months ago. It now has two high-quality assets, which is very rare on the ASX. Most junior companies are happy to have one good quality asset. Well, Strickland has two. We've got significant scale in Serbia, over 5 million ounce gold equivalent in resource. In WA, a more modest resource, but they're highly strategic, highly valued ounces, and I'll explain why a little bit after. Across both projects, we've got excellent upside, geological upside, and that's what we look for as geologists. How do we grow these things from where they are now to the size of something of a mid-tier company? We've got a very rare balance sheet for a junior. We've still got 41 million in cash and Northern Star shares as of the end of last quarter. So all of our work programs are fully funded. And then it comes to people. So, I was very fortunate to be involved in the early days at Fortescue. So I saw firsthand what it takes to build not just a mid-tier company, but a global major from the ground up. And certainly people, along with the quality of the assets, people are the most important thing. And I'm very proud to say at Strickland, we have an amazing team, both in Serbia, where we've got about 25 people on the ground, some of which have been on the project for over 20 years. They've made 4 discoveries over the last 4 years. And the same in Western Australia. We've got a team of about 15 people running the project there. And then this year and next year, we're currently drilling about 80,000 meters. So about 60,000 meters of that is in Serbia. So we are one of the more active resource companies on the ASX, or explorers. And also we're one of the more active explorers in Europe. Okay, so why Serbia? So just before I get onto that, just onto the company, 2.2 billion shares on issue. That's a bit of a legacy of the fact that Strickland has been around in some shape or form for over a decade. Current market cap is about 200 million and the top 20 shareholders own about 51%. Okay, so onto the Rogozna project. And a question I get asked a lot is, why Serbia? Why did you go into Serbia? And the answer to that one was pretty simple. So in 2018, when Adriatic Metals listed on the ASX, like most geologists, I was pretty blown away with the results that they were getting up there in Vares in Bosnia. And so I thought to myself as a geologist that there's got to be similar assets out there like that, not necessarily in terms of grade, but under the radar. So I spent the next 6 months scouring around the Balkans looking for another opportunity like Adriatic. And it was just towards the end of that, around mid 2019, I got a call from a broker who mentioned Eldorado Gold were looking to sell this project, the Rogozna project. Back then it was called the KMC project. So in 2019, why were Eldorado looking to sell this asset? Well, you may remember they were having a real hard time in Greece with the permitting of Skouries, and that also just brought on Lamarck in Canada, and they were also having some troubles with their Turkish operation. So their market cap was over 50% lower than what it is today. And at the time, this project only had 1 year left on its license. So their management basically said, sell all non-core assets. This was on the chopping block, and I just happened to be at the right place at the right time and acquired this with Iberia Capital. One of the things that really stood out to me at the time about Serbia was obviously the geology, the Western Tethyan Belt, Chile and Eastern Europe, a lot of giant deposits. A couple of really successful Canadian companies have been in this part of the world. Obviously, Reservoir Minerals, who discovered Chikara Peki, sold to Nevsun. Nevsun recently bought out over the last few years by Zijin for a couple of $1 billion. Because of the geology and the good quality infrastructure and quite a pro-mining government, all the majors are there. We've got obviously Dundee from your neck of the woods. Zijin have invested several $1 billion over the last few years. BHP have entered the country doing exploration. Rio Tinto obviously there. Vale are there. And further along up the belt, we've got Adriatic Metals, which is over $1 billion company now. Where our project is in the south of the country. This is a historic Trepča mineral district. This was once one of Europe's largest lead, zinc, silver mining districts. And even today, we still have one of those mines in operation. In terms of the geology of the project, this is a porphyry system, so very similar to what you get in South America or even parts of Canada and North America. The big difference with what we've got currently, we've got 4 deposits. We've got 5.4 million ounce gold equivalent just on 2 deposits, but we've got another 2 that we've been drilling out, and they will be put into resources next year. But these are actually skarn-hosted deposits, so a bit different to a porphyry, formed by similar processes, similar fluids, but these deposits are placed into carbonate sequences, and therefore you do get a bit more variability, but with that you get a lot higher grade than you'll get in a porphyry. We've got about 180 square kilometres. We've got the operating Shrinats lead zinc mine right next door, just 4 kilometres from Shrinats, and we own about 90% of the magmatic system. The rest, the other 10%, goes over the border into Kosovo, where Newmont have a JV with a local Canadian junior. So this project's had over 100 million Australian dollars spent on it. It's had over 110,000 metres of drilling now, over 20 years. Freeport owned it in the early 2000s. Then it was Euromax, which is now EMX Royalties, and then Eldorado Gold before Iberia had it. Now obviously Strickland. One thing that has happened each time it's changed hands, there's been another discovery. So this is a very highly endowed project. There's a metal literally everywhere, and every time another group has it, another discovery is made, and we've just made our first discovery under the Strickland banner at Kotlovi in the north. Some of our drilling highlights for this year. So on the ASX, these are pretty much as good as anything you'll see. What we tend to get when we drill these main deposits of Shrinats and Medenovats, we get sort of 200 to 300 plus meters of continuous mineralization. And within that, we get multiple high grade zones, which are anywhere from sort of 10 up to 90 meters thick, but on average are probably 30 to 40 meters thick. We report in gold equivalent because gold is about 60 to 70% of the metal, about 20% is copper, and about 10% is zinc, lead, silver. So Chenats, this is our most advanced deposit. This one's had about 40,000 meters of drilling. It's got the largest resource base, 4.6 million ounce gold equivalent in resources. That resource just sits in the southern part of the deposit, and in the north, we've also got drilled mineralization up here, but that doesn't sit in the current resource estimate. What we've been really focused on this year is drilling this central domain, which is kind of like our high grade core. Probably 80 or 90% of the higher grade mineralization sits either side of this central dike. And so we've really been focused on drilling, particularly the eastern side of this dike this year. And we've got some fantastic results. As you can see here, our real focus was really to better understand and demonstrate the continuity on the higher grade mineralization zones, because it is these zones which will carry any mining scenario, whether it's bulk tonnage, sort of sub-level cave. These high grade zones are very important, or especially if we decide to go down an Adriatic route and go more selective mining, sort of selective long hole open stopes, it'll be chasing this high grade zone. So it's worked. We're in the process of updating the resource estimate at the moment, and that will hopefully be out an upgraded resource in March next year. So this is what Chenats looks like in section. On the left, we've got a long section, about a 40 meter wide view. This is where we hit the 90 odd meters at 4 grams gold. So that zone is quite open along strike. And we've drilled a couple of follow-up holes now. And sitting beneath that, we have a copper gold skarn deposit. And we've been drilling that. And all of this mineralization is open to the north. On the right-hand side, you get to see a bit of the zonation. So in the upper parts, we've got gold skarn, and then within the ore body, we've got the copper gold skarn. So vertically, this deposit is about 250 to 300 meters vertically, by several hundred meters wide, by 500 meters long, and through the core of the deposit, we get about 14,000 ounces gold equivalent per vertical meter. Gradina. So Gradina's located just a couple of kilometers to the southwest of Chenats. All of these deposits are relatively close. Gradina's a pretty important deposit, and we've been drilling it recently, and we'll hopefully put out these first results in the next day or two. Gradina's gold only, or 90% of the metal is gold. And because of that, it's got the easiest metallurgy, about 87, 88% met recovery. But importantly about Gradina, it's only been drilled from this valley previously. So we've recently put a track in up the hill, and we're now drilling it up dip to chase it towards surface. So all the data sets, the geophysics and the geochemistry suggest that mineralization should get fairly close to surface. And we've just finished the first 7 holes up dip along the 1 kilometer of strike. So those results should come out, as I said, in the next couple of days. But what you get in Gradina, you generally get a sort of 100 to 200 meter wide mineralization zone and containing several high grade lodes. And these high grade lodes are anything from sort of a few meters thick and up to sort of 20 or 30 meters thick. So this is, what shows with the multiple lodes. And then there's Medenovat. So Medenovats we discovered in 2021. One of the first holes into the core of this deposit hit over 350 meters of continuous mineralization. This is the most base metals rich, so each of these deposits is a little bit different. So this one, about 60% of the metal is copper with zinc, and about 30 to 40% of the metal is gold. So in the core of the deposit, we hit sort of 50 to 100 meter thick zones of higher grade, sort of 5 gram gold equivalent mineralization. And we've drilled mineralization over 600 meters. So we're currently working on a maiden resource for this. Hopefully we'll be out in late February, and it'll be mainly focused on this southern part of the deposit where we've got, we call the high-grade core. But mineralization totally open along strike and at depth. And importantly, we've just made our first discovery under the Strickland banner, just a few hundred meters away to the southwest at Kotlovi. The first 2 holes into that hit ore-grade mineralization. So Medenovats, this is what it looks like in cross-section through the core. So we just get this really thick, nice, high-grade mineralization, and we think that'll really optimize quite well. Kotlovi, as I said, only a few hundred meters away. We've already, just with 2 drill holes, we've hit several sort of ore-grade intercepts. What's really interesting about this is we got multiple styles of mineralization. We got our normal skarn hosted mineralization. We got high-grade gold in endoskarn. So that's the 12 meters at 5.7. That's quite rare for the project. We also got breccia hosted mineralization up here. That mineralization basically just sits within the class of massive sulfide. So somewhere around there or at depth, there is a massive sulfide body. Just those 2 drill holes, we've already got 400 meters vertically on the mineralization, which is basically what we've got at Medenovat. So this will have greater vertical extent than Medenovats. The fact that we've got limestone sitting above, means we have a good chance of this getting relatively close to surface. And then across the whole project, the exploration upside, we've got over 20 targets. We've flown the whole project with ZTEM. We've covered it with geochemistry over the main license, Eldorado, and had done really good quality work. Did a lot of geophysics, gravity, mag, and IP. We've recently just finished IP over this central license area. We've got a whole heap of targets, blind targets undercover. And here at Jezerska Reka, this is a porphyry target. We've just finished our 2nd hole into that one, and we're drilling our first hole into Obradov Potok at the moment. This is what it looks like in section. So we did IP. We've got a massive IP anomaly at Jezerska Reka. Last year, we drilled the first hole into this and hit 90-odd meters at 0.4 in epithermal mineralization in volcanics, and then we hit a mineralized porphyry underneath that, and we're just drilling just finished the 2nd hole. And Obradov Potok in plan view, this footprint is as big as Medenovats, and we're just drilling at the first hole through this IP anomaly at the moment. All of our deposits have an IP signature that is related to the alteration of the volcanics that sits above the ore bodies. And then that brings us to Western Australia. So as I said earlier, Strickland was a WA-focused explorer, still is. The majority of Strickland's shareholder base invested off the back of this asset, and for good reason. It is a cracking asset, just 50 kilometres from an operating mine, the Jundee mine. Northern Star bought the Millrose deposit last year for $60 million. Strickland kept the other 1,700 square kilometres of tenure, and this year we've been drilling up here at Horsewell, which has got 150,000 ounce historical oxide resources. So Northern Star's operations here produce at about 2,000 Australian dollars all-in sustaining costs. So at the moment, they're making about $2,000 an ounce profit. So any ounces, particularly oxide ounces, that they can get from neighbouring players like us are hugely valuable to Northern Star. So this year we've drilled 20,000 metres, mainly aimed at expanding the Horsewell camp. Our goal for this year was really to extend those oxide resources into the fresh domain and gain a better understanding of the controls on mineralisation across the camp. One of the key learnings that we got this year was that the actual anticline, which is controlling the gold camp, the actual gold camp is about 3 times larger than what's been drilled so far. So all the historical resources sit around here at the south, but immediately to the north, sort of heading up this way, is all under transported cover. So all the historical drilling to the north has largely been ineffective. In terms of the drilling results this year, so the historical resource basically sat just in this shallow area. So we've been drilling down plunge of that and along strike, and we've got some fantastic results, generally hitting in the fresh rock anywhere from 10 metres to 17 metres at kind of 5 to 10 grams gold. We get a lot of free gold here, visible gold. We've got really good recovery. So these are premium ounces. Same with warm blood. So warm blood's over 1 kilometre long. The average drilling depth is just 80 metres. We have started now to drill into the fresh rock this year and sort of getting, again, sort of 5 to 15 metres thick zones of high-grade gold mineralisation. This is completely open. So next year, this is an obvious area for growing the resource base here at Yandal. So the next 12 months, what is there to expect out of Strickland as we are on this journey to become a mid-tier resource company? So we should have the Medenovats mineral resource out, as I said, hopefully in February, closely followed by an updated Shanats resource. A maiden Gradina resource we're targeting around September next year, and then by the end of the year, a scoping study into a stage 1 mine development at Rogozna. Whilst we're doing that in WA, we'll keep hitting that ground pretty hard as well. Over 20,000 metres to be drilled there next year. We'll put out a resource update, hopefully late March, and then drill another 20,000 metres focused on new targets to the north, as well as warm blood. And most importantly, all of that work is fully funded. With the money that we've got on hand in our work program, we don't need to raise cash for another 18 months. So in summary, why invest in Strickland, and certainly why I have invested in Strickland? 2 quality assets. They're both strategic in their own rights. Serbia, Rogozna project, given its scale, we think there's real potential to take that to north of 10 million ounce gold equivalent over the next 12 to 18 months. And that will really be on the radar of all the majors who are looking in the region. We've got a lot of catalysts with 80,000 metres of drilling and multiple resource upgrades. When you combine all this, we have exceptional leverage to both discoveries and resource growth, but also the strong gold price. And I think when you put all this together, it's a really, I think we've got a good recipe for the creation of really sustainable long-term value here. Thank you.
Perfect. Great presentation, Paul. So now we'll turn to the Q&A portion of the webinar, and just a reminder to everybody on the line that you can type your questions in at any point. So that said, we do have some that have come in. Maybe we'll start on the corporate side here. You did mention in the presentation, you're currently sitting on about, 41 million in cash and shares. Just kind of where does that take you going into the future, and what would future financing, potential future financing look like? What would you consider as options?
Yeah, so that funding will keep us in good stead for the next 18 months. With the plan that we've got, we may choose to sort of increase the pace a little bit next year. We're already going pretty hard. This year we had 7 rigs across both projects, but next year we might increase that to probably 8. But yeah, we think it'll last 18 months. Then after that, we'll be mainly looking at equity, I would think, to take things forward. There is actually already a royalty on the main license in Serbia, where the current resources sit. That royalty sits with Franco-Nevada.
Okay, perfect. And then maybe just touching on M&A, I know there was an announcement this morning with Lundin selling one of their assets to Boliden, but just wondering kind of, what's your view on that? I know you just got Rogozna this year. I guess what's the view going forward?
Yeah, we continue to monitor and look at projects worldwide, not necessarily for the here and now, but as a geologist, I've been doing it for the last 10 plus years looking at projects. So I get a lot of people calling me up saying, hey, can you take a look at this, or are you interested in this? So, there's always a next one, right? So whenever that time may be. So yeah, we continue to look, but we're not in a hurry just yet.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Okay. So let's turn, I guess, to the assets here at Rogozna. I guess, how do you see that project evolving? Is you kind of outlined this year where the resources are planned. Is it going to be focusing more on the discovery aspect down the line, or more and building up more critical mass, or is it more drilling it out and getting a higher confidence in the deposits you have?
Yeah, good question. I get actually asked that quite a lot because, we've obviously got a lot going on there geologically. Essentially we've got 4 projects in one, right, at the moment, and now we've just got a new discovery. But the way I view it, we're kind of running a parallel process where, we want to deliver a scoping study by the end of next year just to understand what does stage 1 look like. Because certainly the way we view this project is it'll just be a sequence of mine developments. The first one will come on, then a few years later you bring on the second one, then a few years later you bring on the third, and so on, and just continue growing the asset that way, but in a very sort of disciplined way, in terms of capital. Now, obviously, when a major's looking at this, they kind of look at it a little bit differently. They might want to go real big, real quick. But certainly the way we're looking at it is a staged approach. But importantly, we want to keep doing exploration as well. So we think by the end of next year, we'll have good visibility on the critical mass. Once we put out Medenovats and Gradina resources, we're very confident it's got the critical mass that it needs, whether that be the bulk tonnage operation or the more selective mining. We think it'll have a very long mine life. But we just see so many targets. It's that sort of place that everywhere you drill, you get some degree of mineralization, and we think 1 or 2 more discoveries, and then we got line of sight towards 20. And there's not many projects like that in the world.
All right. Okay, and then on the exploration side and making those discoveries, what have you found to be the most effective exploration techniques? And I know you mentioned in the presentation that the mineralization styles are different in different deposits, and how does that affect how you're going about your exploration?
Well, certainly every skarn-hosted deposit we've got at the moment that has volcanics sitting above it has got very strong IP and resistivity anomalies sitting above the deposit, mapping that alteration. So that's been super effective. One other thing that we had that was really effective was when Iberia acquired the project from Eldorado. We had Eldorado's geophysics reprocessed and the 3D inverted. And the 3D inversion of the gravity came up with a massive anomaly at Medenovats, which wasn't fully clear or obvious in the 2D data sets. And where that anomaly, in the middle of that anomaly, it sort of thins out. And our interpretation was, maybe that was either a structure cutting across, or maybe stronger retrograde alteration has eaten away at the density. Anyway, that's where we drilled our first section of holes and where we found the high grade core. So that was hugely advantageous as well. So, and then, geochemistry as well. So generally, if you've got a geochem anomaly and at least one of the geophysics anomalies, that's a pretty good recipe that there's something there.
Perfect. Okay. And then on the scoping study side, as you build up to that, lots of drilling going on, will you have to do you have any metallurgical programs planned in the year coming up?
Yeah, so we've already started the met test work for Shanats. This is kind of stage 2 met test work. We did a heap in 2020, 2021 with Iberia. That was kind of scoping level, PEA level test work back then. So we're aiming to get to sort of PFS level test work for the scoping study. And the reason being, with these skarn deposits, the polymetallic can be a bit tricky. We've basically kicked off. I've already started getting early results. So, and Medenovats test work is about to kick. We're about to send the samples in the next week or 2.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so I'll put out a final call for questions to the audience here, and if you have a question, please submit the question now, and I'll give Paul a minute to just kind of wrap up with maybe top 3 reasons to buy the stock, or a final pitch to investors, just to give them something to think about. If you want to go ahead, Paul, and maybe...
All right, no dramas. Okay, so, 3 reasons. Obviously, the assets, we're very confident we're going to double this resource base in pretty short time, so we've got great leverage to growth there. Fully funded, you don't see that very often, but we don't need to dilute shareholders, so we're just growing from here. And the third one is, the people, the people that we have across both assets and in the leadership in the company are world class. They warrant, the projects warrant this sort of teams, and they go hand in hand together. So without that, you can have a good project and not the right people, you're going to go nowhere. We've got the best of both worlds on both. So those three things, I think, is why you should consider investing in Strickland.
Perfect. So with that, I don't see any other questions that have come into the chat. So I think we'll wrap up and leave it there. I would like to thank Paul from Strickland Metals for taking the time to host the webinar today with Red Cloud Securities. And thank you to everybody who tuned in on the line with us today.
Thanks, Tyler, and thanks, everyone.